You're listening to Ordinary Eccentrics. I'm Courtney Lofton, and together we'll uncover the extraordinary lives of ordinary people. Let's hop into it. Okay, before we get started, could you just say your first and last name for me?
Shaun, Mandy.
Thank you. Okay, so Shaun, this is really just an open conversation between you and I. And I
Yeah.
want to get to know you more and allow you space to share your story. I like to ask people to kind of begin with their origin story. So if you want to share where
Okay.
you're from, where you're born, raised, all of that good stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Should I just get started with that?
Yeah, we'll just jump right in.
Okay. Cool. um, so I was born in South Africa in
Uh-huh.
a place called Sommerset West, which is in the Cape, so near Cape Town. And I grew up on a farm outside a little village called Villiersdorp. So yes, my childhood was in South Africa, mainly farm life. And I was
Uh-huh.
also homeschooled for sort of the last 6 years of my schooling. I was homeschooled. And yeah, and my mum, her family were from England, so my dad was South
Uh-huh.
African. But just after I finished school, my parents decided to relocate back to the UK, and so I went with them. And so my adult life has all been in England. Apart from a
Interesting.
short stint in Denmark, and I'm now currently living in Uruguay.
Oh, so cool. Okay, so I'll ask you more about where you are now, but what was it like growing up in South Africa?
So I I had a great childhood in many ways.
Mhm.
Loving parents. I had a love for horses, and I was very lucky to have a riding school open up on a neighboring farm when I was very young. So my passion for horses, which is also part of my career now, um,
Mhm.
I was allowed to sort of be there every day after school, and that was very good for me because so I have a brother, and he was always very academic, and he sort of, when he was young, he kind of knew, he was like, I want to be an accountant, that's what I'm going to do. And he was very good at maths, and I didn't love school. And
Mhm.
so for me, the horses and the ponies was a good outlet for me. And also I happened to be a little bit talented with it, and so I was being allowed to sort of pursue that, which was great. And yeah, so the childhood overall was good. Um I did experience, when I was very young, I did experience sexual abuse. Um, and it was actually a family friend's son, older son. And
Mhm.
that is something that only came up much later in my life. I only sort of came out with it in my 30s, in my early 30s, that this ever happened to me. So that's
Mm.
something that happened in my childhood, but it certainly didn't define my childhood. And it was, as I say, I actually had a very happy childhood. And I think in a way that was maybe one of the reasons why I kind of feel like I could cope with it quite well, because I had very loving family. So yeah,
Yeah. Are you the youngest of your siblings or the oldest?
I am. So I am 19. There's a 19-month age difference. So my brother's 19
Okay.
months older than me. Yeah. And we're very close.
Oh, nice. What
Yeah.
got you into, or were you doing horses when you started um being homeschooled?
Yes, so we had a local school, De Villiers, which was pretty much the only school in
Hmm.
Villiersdorp. So my brother and I went there to primary school, and the option was then for my parents. They didn't want us to go to the high school there, and so the option was to send us to boarding school, which would be probably Somerset West or Cape Town, sort of an hour or so away. And
Hmm.
my parents or my mum didn't want to send us away. she I think my dad would have been very happy for us to go to boarding school. Mum didn't want that to happen, and so she decided to homeschool us on the farm.
That's interesting because I feel like you usually hear about people being homeschooled in their younger years and then going to school in high. it was when in your older years.
Yeah, well, so
Cool.
I yeah, so I was 12, or I just turned 13 when we started homeschooling. So
Yeah.
my brother is starting his first year of high school, exactly. And then well, actually, so my brother completed his schooling years through homeschooling. My final year of school, I went back into a school, but things had looked a bit different at that time because my mum had actually come to the UK to do some work, and I had been sort of struggling a little bit with the schoolwork. So the decision was to put me into a school for my final year. And actually, my grades did go up. It was the right school for me. It was a private school, but it was
Okay.
very small, and the teachers really paid attention and to me. So yeah, it was actually a very good move for me to have that final year in school. Yeah.
And then after that, finally, your whole family moved back to the UK.
Yeah, so pretty much that year, my brother had started university at Cape Town doing accounting. He knew that's what he wanted to do, and he actually got a place
Wow.
in Bournemouth University, and so
Wow.
he went. So that was the year 2002. He was still in his first year of, because obviously the academic year in South Africa is different to the UK. So academic year is January to kind of November, December, and then or November, and then in the UK, it's like the States as well. I think it's like the States where it's September time as you start your academic year. But anyway, so he started year two at Bournemouth University, and a few months after that, I came over with my parents. So I literally wrote my final exams at school in November, turned 18, got my driver's license, and the next week I was on a plane and starting my life in the UK.
Wow. What was life like in the UK compared to Africa?
I loved it, and I still do love it. It's always, to me, UK has always been home to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting one for me. Yes, there were many great things about South Africa, my childhood, and that I'm so grateful for. But I
Mm-hmm.
never felt like South Africa was home to me,
Mm.
which I can't exactly put my finger on exactly why. I think, there are a few reasons, I'm sure. And I think I was very aware as well of the crime, in South Africa. I was very aware
Mm-hmm.
of, everything that was going on there. And I probably didn't feel too safe all the time. There were a few things that I witnessed as a kid as well that I saw, you know, which, for example, well, I don't maybe need to get into now unless you want me to, but I
Oh,
saw some horrific things, and yeah, and I think maybe that really stuck in my mind, and so I think I remember feeling like, yeah, I want to leave this country. I don't want this to be my home. And anyway,
mhm.
I love England, and again, my family are all who are all from England, and so it was a little bit like nearly like coming home, even though I'd only been
Yeah.
over once as a kid on holiday to visit my aunt and uncle. When I landed and I was 18 and I got straight into work, because I didn't go to university. It was like I'd come home. So yeah.
Interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about the things you saw, or do you feel like it's not relevant?
Oh, well, no, I can. Just, so for example, when I was about 12, around about 11 or 12, I saw a little boy who had been murdered on our farm.
Mm.
And I
Oh.
saw his, yeah, I saw his body. And it was horrific, and I was shadowing my dad, and it was school holidays, and I was shadowing my dad on the farm, and we were in the office, and one of the farm workers came running in to this office, and I and he sort of said he said, boss, you must come now, quickly, all this thing.
Mm.
And my dad, I to this day, I'm not even sure if he was totally aware I was still there with him, because it was sort of, I could tell there was a bit of a panic, something was going on. But I just jumped
Mhm.
in the pickup truck with my dad and all the other farm workers. I just jumped in the back with them, and off we went, down the farm roads to the orchard where they were telling my dad he had to go. And then we got there, and there was this boy who had been stabbed to death. Um,
Wow.
and so things like that. And as a young kid, I used to play with the kids on the farm, and you know, that could have been a kid I've been playing with, and I think I also felt like that could have been me. And because when you're
Okay.
okay, I later found out what had happened. It was really awful and tragic, because basically his mother had been having an affair with this guy, and she called it off, and the guy got jealous and he
Oh,
murdered her son. I mean, it was horrific.
wow.
But when I was that age, all I thought was, oh well, what if it's me? What if they want to kill
Right.
me? You
Right.
can't sort of rationalize it too well. So and what's interesting, even I've had this conversation with my parents later, as an adult, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't even remember this. Like my dad is like, did that
Oh,
even happen? So it's amazing, I think, what people also shut out of their minds. And
yeah.
like my mum is horrified. She said, did you really expect? Why didn't you tell me? I said, and maybe I didn't even tell my mum. Maybe I was too shocked that when we went home again, I didn't say anything about it. But it was that, and also when I was there, so this was the late 90s, there was a
Mm-hmm.
group called Pagad, which was stood for People Against Guns and Drugs. But
Mm.
kind of ironically, they did go around sometimes shooting people. It was a bit weird, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so we were at the Cape Town waterfront mall, nice weekend day, and they came in and they opened fire, and it was all very manic, and people running out, and like I saw people clutching themselves with blood and running down. And so
Oh,
the things like that, little thing, I say little things, but things like that really stuck in my mind. And I thought, I don't like it here.
right. Of course.
But
And
it's interesting, because my brother, again, growing up in the same house, obviously, as me, but he didn't see it like that. He didn't have those views. But yes, he was with us on that day. But the other thing, like, he didn't see the boy, and he didn't experience as well. As I said earlier
mm-hmm.
on, when I said I did experience sexual abuse when I was a kid, there,
Mm-hmm.
there were things like that maybe, also made me feel unsafe in certain ways about being there.
Right. Like there's almost a separation between your environment and who you were as a person. Like you live there, but you're not a part of all of that.
Exactly, exactly. And it's interesting, because going back, I have been back, a few times as an adult.
Uh-huh.
In the earlier days, I haven't been back for a while, but I actually always enjoyed going back, because I felt like I'm going back on holiday. I'm kind of feel like I'm a tourist. I'm not there to stay, and I can
Mm-hmm.
come and visit, and it was fun, and then I leave again. Um,
Right.
so I saw it very differently. But when people have said to me in the past, like, oh, would you ever go back to live? And like literally, it's never even been on my radar. It's not even been like, no, not even a thought. That was when I
Mm-hmm.
left. I left. That was it. It wasn't like, oh, maybe one day I'll come back here and live. No, never.
Did you feel like like almost like escaped, like you got away from
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
How did you cope as a child living there and experiencing abuse, experiencing, seeing a lot of violent scenes?
Yeah.
How, as a child, did you cope with that?
So I think, again, as I said before, I did have a very loving family. So, the abuse side of it was actually, maybe I compartmentalized certain things, but, I was 6 years old when that started. But
Mhm.
up until that age, I had had a very, what I would say, normal childhood with two loving parents. My parents, stayed together this whole time. I had a very
Mhm.
strong family unit in that sense. And when that did start happening when I was 6, it was, as I say, it was actually my mother's best friend's son. Okay. And so he was actually, okay, he was about 7 years older than me. He was
Mhm.
still a boy himself, and I
Yeah.
found out later in life, I did find out that his father was um physically abusive to him. He was quite he was
Mm.
a strict father, and and I actually found out that his father at one point was so strong with him, he broke his arm. So this poor
Yeah.
kid was having abuse himself from his father. So it could have been something that he just did to me because he wanted to be able to control something, or
Mhm.
you know but so, as much as all of that, was of course wrong and all of that, but I don't it I don't know how to describe it. It's not like I was like scared about it, or really, you know, sad, or I feel like I had a great childhood, and this was thrown in the mix, and it wasn't great. And I did need to
Right.
deal with it. And as I say, I did need to tell my parents, I got to 31 and I'm now 39. I got to 31 and I was like, right, I need to say something. And I think because I was having little breakdowns and I
Mm,
couldn't quite figure out why. Even now, as I'm telling you this, I can feel myself, like feel the emotions there. So it was
mhm.
something I had to deal with. But equally, I had so much joy in my childhood. And I think, again, from the horses, I had that outlet, where I was able to
Mm,
ride every day. And it was my passion. So, I have so much to be grateful for in that sense. Right.
yeah. You were able to find other outlets for finding joy, happiness, like self-expression that you didn't let your environment affect your mental psyche as much.
I would say yes. I would say exactly right. Yeah.
And when you got to England or you got to the UK, what was it like for you? Did you feel more safe? Did you like I know you said it felt more like home.
Mm.
So were you able to have better connections with people? Did it just feel like what did that feel like?
Yeah, so I did, and I got into. I was very lucky because before we came over to the UK, I had a job lined up for me
Mhm.
through a friend of my aunt's, and it was in the New Forest. It was working with horses, and actually it was working with adults with learning disabilities and
Mm.
therapy with horses in that sense. Now that wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do or get into, but it was a stepping stone for me, and
Mhm.
I when I arrived, I just like it was like I was grabbing life with both hands and going for it. I just embraced everything. And it was very, soon after that I started that job that I got introduced to some Olympic riders. And, so my career sort of took off in that sense because I was able to work for top athletes and Olympic riders.
Mhm.
And yeah, I met my today, who's my best friend. I met my best friend a few months after moving to England, and today she's still my best friend. And you know,
Oh.
we've done countless holidays together, and we've and it's been amazing. So yeah, I feel like yes, my life really took off. And when I was that age, I was very, very much, go getter. Anything's
Uh-huh.
possible, just keep believing. Like I didn't feel like I had any doubt about things. I was like, well, I'm going to just do that, and it worked out,
Yeah.
and I did it.
I
Yeah,
love that. Wait, do you follow like signs or astrology? What is your sign?
I'm Scorpio.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. So when you're 18, you're kind of coming of age in your home in the UK. How would you describe yourself then compared to now? And like what kind of person did you visualize becoming when you were that age?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question because my dream was to ride internationally and compete. So
Mhm.
with the horses in eventing and the sport of eventing, and I I went through a few years a bit of a rocky road with a few things, and I got bent a little bit in a few experiences, and
Mhm.
taught me some very valuable lessons. But equally, my path slightly changed out of the discipline of eventing into pure dressage in sort of
Mhm.
my mid 20s, and and then my goal was always still to compete internationally. And I got in dressage, I got up to Grand Prix, which is the highest level of competition, so it is your sort of it is your Olympic level. But I didn't I was the year I was going to start competing internationally, which was actually only 2 years ago. um my horse that I had trained up to that level, he sadly died quite suddenly of an illness. So I still haven't got to realize that dream of mine or that goal of mine.
Mhm.
But I I feel like over the last few years I've been on quite a learning journey for myself, and
Yeah.
there's a lot when I was younger. As much as I had that attitude, like, yeah, I can do anything, let's go for it, everything else. But I still without actually realizing there were still many limiting beliefs that I did have then that I'm learning about now and how to, free myself from that. Um, and also I feel like it's when I look back at that, I kind of wish like when I was at school, I could have learned all these lessons that I'm learning now. And
Mm.
like, the just the whole mindfulness and,
Mhm.
you know, figuring, I don't know, figuring yourself out more.
Yeah.
That, yeah, I suppose everyone could say that, couldn't they? I wish I knew knew now, knew
If I
back
had known
then what
then
I
what
knew
I know
now.
now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, wait 1 second just to give an overview of horses and equestrian riding because I'm really not familiar. What is dressage and sporting? What could you explain that?
Yeah, sure. So dressage is it's an Olympic discipline, Olympic sport.
Mhm.
So you've got, if you look at it, the Olympic sports of the equestrians, you've got show jumping, which is when
Mhm.
the horse and rider, they're jumping, as it says, jumping very big fences. And then there's eventing, which is when horse and rider does a bit of dressage on the one day, bit of show jumping, and then they go cross country, which is galloping around over big obstacles. And the dressage is at a lower level because you've got the three disciplines. And then you've got the pure dressage, which is what I do, which is, it's like horses dancing. It's like horses doing ballet.
Okay.
So it's all about being very correct, and it's all about discipline and, developing these horses to dance and be athletes. And it's
Yeah.
all about the rider being able to be very much in balance with the horse and be very well trained to, with the slightest signal, let the horse know what they want them to do. So you see the horse maybe suddenly moving sideways, but you look at the rider and go, wow, the rider's not doing anything. So it's literally, sort of pressure release and using muscles that, from the ground,
Mhm.
people aren't necessarily seeing what you're doing, but you're, getting the horse to perform underneath you.
And so that involves like a really good relationship between the rider and the horse. You can't just get on any horse
Yeah,
and
it
okay.
it does, but what it really involves is years and years and years of training because,
Mm.
if, for example, we start training a horse for dressage when they are 4 years old, but you've got to start fairly slowly because they're still developing their own strength muscles, and they don't really stop growing till they're 6 years old, right? So the first
Mhm.
couple of years, you've got to be very careful and develop them steadily. But it takes a good 5 years to get a horse when you started to Grand Prix because it
Mhm.
it's a lot of training, and at the end result, the horse has to be a very strong athlete, and so
Mhm.
it, like humans, you can't just make that happen overnight. It does take time. It takes, good amount of training, and of course it takes the skill from the rider, so to be able to train. So, and in the sport, I'd be constantly coached by my own coach that I had training me, who was,
Mm.
you um, and this is what I do now. I train riders as well. So and that's what I'm doing here in Uruguay. I'm coaching riders for their
Oh,
sport.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And then it's like having it's like they're like your pets or your friends too, right? So I'm sure losing a horse is devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a real strong connection there. It's the way I would say slightly different, say the difference is, yeah, I also
Mhm.
had my dog, my Jack Russell, and she was like my
Mhm.
shadow, and I felt like she was like my little child. She went everywhere with me.
Yeah.
And my horse, yes, I love dearly, but for me, and this is just personally, because obviously a lot of people
Mhm.
ride for hobbies and everything else. He was also part of my career, so
Right.
there's a lot of finances involved. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get up to that level. Potential sponsors you need to have, owners, investors, because it gets very, very costly when you get up to that level.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of going, and for me as well, I actually, just before my horse did die, there was actually a moment where I was going to be selling him because he was suddenly worth £250,000. So you suddenly
Mm.
got a horse, because when they get to that level and they're a good age, they're very valuable. And
Right.
my trainer at the time said to me, and I wasn't thinking of selling him, but my trainer said, "Look, Shaun,
Yeah.
if you're thinking of selling him at all, now is the time because he's a good age, and now is the time you will get that sort of money." And so it was kind of like, okay, I should be doing this because that sort of, for me, that was life-changing money. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's that emotion of like, oh, I don't want to, because I obviously love him, but also I'm then parting with my chance of going international and et cetera, et cetera. But what happened actually is that I did have a client for him who was going to buy him at that price. And when you
Mhm.
sell a horse, they go through a pre-sale vetting. So the
Mhm.
vet will check them out, of course, make sure their legs are all sound, their ligaments and tendons and bones and everything's good, and breathing and, heart and everything. So they go through a full vetting and they have x-rays, and he passed everything on the vetting. But when they went to scan his legs, which they don't always do, they x-ray is standard, but always scan the leg. But the vet felt something, and he thought, I'm going to scan this leg. And they found a tiny little hole in his suspensory of one of his
Mm.
legs. And so he failed the vetting because of that, which, I totally understand. No one's going to want to spend that sort of money if there's a chance that the horse might go lame, and it might be an issue.
Mhm.
So, but I saw that as a sign. Like, I was like, okay, this is a sign from the universe. I'm not meant to part with
Yeah.
him. So there was a moment I was like, oh, devastated. But then I was like, no, okay, this is my horse. This is good. I'm going to get
Yeah.
him sound and we'll crack on. And, a few months after that, we were back in work and training again. And it was, literally then when he sadly got colic, which horses, it's a fairly common thing for horses. And normally colic can be very mild and it's not a big deal, but sometimes colic can be very drastic and,
Mhm.
they need operations. But this unfortunately was too far gone. So, you know,
Mm.
but again, with that happening, it put me onto a different path in life. So, yes, I was devastated at the time. And of course, but had that not happened, I wouldn't be sitting here in Uruguay. And I feel like I was meant to come
Mm.
to Uruguay. And at that time, there was no question of me coming to Uruguay. I didn't even know really, I wasn't even sure exactly where Uruguay was. But, so for me, these things happen. And I feel like you can look at it. I feel like it depends on the way you look at something as to what's going to happen next in your life.
Right.
And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be sad or grieve for something, because of course that is normal. But I also feel like that happened. I was sad, but I was very quick, or maybe not quick, but well, yeah, maybe quick. I was quick to kind of look forward again and go, okay,
Right.
well, this has happened. Now what? Now I'm moving on. Now I'm doing this. Right. So, and
Yeah.
I feel like that's a little bit how I look at life, as to then when an opportunity showed itself to me, I was able to see it. I wasn't
Right.
kind of, you know, all down and depressed
No,
about.
even just from talking to you this amount of time, I see it sounds like in your story, when things happen to you that kind of shift the trajectory of your life, you take it as a sign to like move directions and just go full force in that direction now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how did you end up deciding to go to Uruguay?
So what happened was, so just after my horse died, I got contacted by, well, it was actually someone I knew in Windsor who contacted me and said that they had a friend in Germany who had a friend in Uruguay who was looking for someone to come and train some horses in Uruguay. And she had thought of me, and would I be interested? And I remember looking at the message thinking, no, I don't think I would be interested. I'm not sure I want to do that. And also I had my little dog, who Pringle, as I said, who was my little shadow. And, I had lived in Denmark before, and she had come with me, and I wouldn't leave her at anywhere. Like, she would always come with me. But I felt
Yeah.
at this stage in her life, she was getting, I think she was about, well, she must have been 13 and a half. And I
Mhm.
felt like, I don't know that I'd want to travel my little dog all halfway around the world. Um, and I just sort of thought, nah, not right now in my life. So,
Mhm.
but being polite, I got in touch with the person in Uruguay, and we had a conversation. And I had actually a little conference call with her and her husband. And it turned out that actually what they were looking for, who they were looking for, was not really me anyway, because they really wanted someone to come and more do beach rides on their farm. And that's not me. I'm,
Mhm.
competitive. I want to train horses, and
Yeah.
I don't want to take tourists out on the beach. So we actually ended up having a really good call, and they were lovely. And when the call ended, I remember thinking, gosh, what lovely people. And it ended in a way
Yeah.
saying, look, let's keep in touch. Maybe something changes, because she was actually in Florida at the time, and she was keen to bring some more horses to Uruguay that maybe I could
Mhm.
train. So we left it like, okay, well, maybe someday, one day, something might happen. And it was then in January this year, my darling little Pringle, my dog,
Mm.
she died of cancer. And again, it was quite sudden. She got diagnosed just before Christmas. And yeah, it was quite a sudden thing. So early in the new year, she did, well, I had her put to sleep, because it was the best thing
Mhm.
for her at that time. And
Yeah.
anyway, but I was then suddenly in a very different position as well, because now I didn't have my horse and now I also didn't have my dog. And I'm single. I, didn't didn't have a mortgage. I was renting. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I could quite easily just pack up and go. What should I do? And I was also in a place where my business things weren't brilliant for me. I was a little bit like, oh, okay, what's going to happen? What's going on? And she popped into my head and I contacted her and I said, look, things have changed. Maybe I could come out. And she literally said, well, when can you be here? Get on a flight. Come on. So it just went like that. And so that was towards the end of January that we had the call. And on the 6th of February, I was in Uruguay.
Wow, and you'd never been to Uruguay before?
Never been to Uruguay. Yeah, it just wasn't even on my radar. But
Yeah.
I love it. And I'm still here.
Nice. And that's you got there just this year, this past February, or is that
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. This
wow.
February. Yeah, yeah. So it's not quite been a year, but it's it's the reason I stayed was because in a short space of time, I built up some clients here that I could be coaching and working with.
Mhm.
So it just made sense. Had I not done that, I would have just gone straight home. And that's how it was sort of,
Mhm.
she had said to me, why don't you come and see? I want you to help me with this horse, but see if we build up more clients for you. And
Mhm.
it just happened, within 10 days, I had a good client base established pretty much.
Yeah.
Which made sense for me to stay. And I think, big reason for that is because Uruguay, as much as there are a lot of horses here, there are not many people who do dressage, and there are not many sort of competitions. And there wasn't, and I think still now, there isn't anyone at my level of riding and
Mhm.
training. So it was a little bit of that scenario, big fish in a small pond. You know,
Mhm.
back in England, I'm a little fish in a big pond, loads of Grand Prix riders and trainers and Olympic
Right.
athletes in my sport. Out here, just me.
Yeah. So what advice would you give for someone who's in a position where maybe they have an opportunity to do something completely different and go someplace they've never been before and are maybe more on the fence about taking on a big change?
I would say trust your gut. That would be my
Mhm.
thing. I would say try and keep a real open mind to opportunities and possibilities. And I think, for me, I've been self-employed for a long time.
Mhm.
And I when this situation, when it came about, I was in a bit of a crunch time for me. It was like I
Mhm.
felt a little bit like make it or break it right now, because
Yeah.
there was just things that had happened to me in that time where my business wasn't great. I didn't have enough clients. Things weren't good. Obviously, I'd lost my horse. Then I suddenly lost my dog. I
Mhm.
was sad, of course. But I was equally trying to sort of tread water. I was like, right, I've got to keep my head above. I've got to do something. What's going to happen? And so when those things happen, I start to think, who do I know? Who do I know in other countries? What do I know? That's exact. And
Mm.
what happened was I was literally having coffee with a friend, and she said she had just got a job in New York, and she was so excited and I said, oh, and I said, I didn't even know you wanted to move to America. And she's like, well, I didn't think I did, but I've got this job opportunity and it's in New York and I would love to go. And I said, amazing. That's so exciting. And in that moment, I was like, who do I know somewhere else in the world?
Yeah.
And I remembered the conversation with the people in Uruguay. And I was like, oh, what about Uruguay for me? So,
Mhm.
I was trying to keep a real open mind to what could come into my life to get me back on my feet, basically.
Right.
Um,
And when
and
you're yeah, go
mhm.
on.
I was going to
Keep
say,
going.
when for me, it's like change comes when you're out of your comfort zone,
Yes.
and I wasn't in a comfortable place. I wasn't,
Right.
you know, and I was sad for losing Pringle. I was very sad, but equally, I wasn't in a comfortable place with my business and what I was doing.
Right.
Things weren't great for me at that moment. Um, and there were a few other factors coming in. So for me, that is something that can drive change, and I think you kind of nearly either have that mindset of, oh, poor me, and why is everything going wrong in my life? And I've just,
Mhm.
it's not fair. Or you go, okay, this is happening. What can I do?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to live my life like this. And it was for me, I was like, this is not defining me. I'm not going to live my life like this. I'm going to have better. So,
Right.
you
So,
yeah.
as I love that mentality and that way of making decisions and moving forward. And as a an entrepreneur and someone who owns your own business, when you do get to those points of treading water, and I think everyone goes through that, of like, oh, I'm trying to keep my head above water here. What
Yeah.
keeps you motivated to keep going and not going down that spiral of, oh, like, I'm gonna lose everything. Like, do I need to get
Mm,
like some random corporate
mm,
job? Like, how do I keep this going? How do you
mm.
keep committing to yourself and your business, and how do you stay motivated?
Yeah, I love that question because, years ago, I did slip into those places of like, oh, this, where I just want to put a duvet over my head and be like, oh, make it go away. Why is this happening to me? And
Yeah.
now, how I don't let that myself get to that place is I listen to a podcast. I listen to an audiobook. I listen to something positive. I put on,
Mm,
I love Earl Nightingale. I find him
mm,
what an incredible human being. And I will listen to one of his teachings on YouTube. I'll just type in Earl Nightingale, and something will come up that I listen to. So I'll basically put my headspace into something positive by either reading a book that's going to lift me
mhm,
up. So I have books like around me. I have
mhm.
books like Think and Grow Rich, um,
Yeah.
The Science of Getting Rich. I love that book.
Mhm.
The Secret. I love that book.
Love
So
that.
I
Yeah.
have those. I have like on my bedside table, and I have my Audible. I'm always listening to books that are inspirational, or that I'm going to learn from.
Right.
So I try and put my focus into something that either I can learn something or
Mhm.
I can just simply be motivated by other great human beings.
Right.
And that's what I do now to kind of get myself. And I have to say, I do not every day, but I regularly write in a gratitude journal. So
Mhm.
try and keep myself in a good place. I regularly write down things that I can be grateful for. I really
Mhm.
like that practice.
Yeah.
And I learnt that practice. It was Bob Proctor. So I also, he was an amazing man.
He's in The Secret too, right? Bob
He
Proctor?
is. He is in The Secret.
Yeah.
He is in The Secret, and he wrote the book. He wrote the book You Were Born Rich, and
Mm.
again, it's an amazing book, and it's not just about money. That's not, there's so many life
Right.
lessons in that book. But equally
Right.
with all these books, and it sounds like I'm just reading about how to get rich, but I'm not. These books are so many life lessons. And yes, there's a lot about learning. Yes, obviously, how to
Yes.
make money, etc. But there's so much more in them. There's so much depth to them. And so for me, that is something that I do now. And I've learned a lot, as I say, with, for example, the gratitude journal, and even just journaling,
Mhm.
I find that very helpful. I say practicing meditation because I haven't, I try and do it as often as I can. I'm not in a like daily routine with it, but I want to get there.
Mhm.
So I things like that. And another thing for me is just to go out for a walk. I'm very lucky. I live very close to the beautiful coastline. The Atlantic Ocean is right on my
Mhm.
doorstep, and I'll just go down and
Oh,
go to the beach and walk. You know,
yeah. So you're
I
very
find
aware of
it.
how to shift the energy into a positive, abundant place when it gets kind of out of that.
I Yes, I am now, but I would say that's been literally over the last. Uh, it's all for me. It all sort of started in lockdown, COVID lockdown, March
Yeah.
2020. I became more aware of myself. I became more aware of my emotions,
Mm.
my feelings, and so I I've been on this journey, which I'm still on, and I love it because it is helping
Yeah.
me. It's helping my mental health, or brain health.
Yeah.
I know people like to call it different things, but it's helping me not to get into those places that maybe that slight slip into depression or that slight slip into like, oh, okay, well, this is sad for me and I'm going to mope about it. Like, you
Right.
know, because yeah, that's something. And again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't embrace all our emotions. And if you're going to feel sad, of course. I just feel for me, I try and turn that into something more positive, that I don't dwell in it, that I don't stay in that space for
Right.
too long. I acknowledge it,
Right.
but I don't stay in it for too long.
And you don't it sounds like you don't let self-doubt like, oh, maybe I don't have this skill, or maybe I'm not going to find like the right people to work with, that's holding you back. It sounds like it is more something that motivates you to keep trying to find a way.
Definitely. I'm also a great believer in bringing things into your life. So
Mhm.
I do strongly believe in that. And I've seen that unfold, a lot just in the last sort of 9 months. When I think of my
Mhm.
last 9 months journey of just being here, I mean, the things that have unfolded in my life, I mean, in a way, it's like unreal, just that what's happened. But then I do believe that you bring that into your life because of
Right.
the way, you know, not just a little bit like, that saying, what you think or how you think you are, what you think, focus on,
Mhm.
what you put your focus on, you become kind of thing. So,
Right.
I'm a great believer in that if you do keep focusing on things that you want in your life or that you want to happen, you will make those things happen. Not that it's just going to suddenly fall into your lap, but you will make it happen, and
Right.
when you're in that mindset, you suddenly meet the right people. You meet the people that you need to meet for things to start happening.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Totally. That you're inspiring me, because I go through times. I'm in Bali right now, and I have to be so grateful for where I am, and like achieving a goal that I wanted. But then
Yeah.
when I get so future focused, I'm like, I don't have it all right now. How am I going to put all I start worrying about the how instead of just focusing on the what, and like taking little
Mm.
steps to get there. And I'm really interested to hear from other people who are just living this life, and like being entrepreneurs and doing things that they want to do, not that they feel like they have to do to just get by, of how
Mm.
you stay motivated and how you overcome the obstacles and the tests. I think a lot of things are tests for us, like
Mm.
challenges that come across our lap. How do you overcome them without
Mm.
completely like losing heart?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what you said there early on, where you said not knowing the how to get there. And I think that's such an important thing. Is like, yes, you shouldn't focus on how it's going to happen. You've got to focus on
Hmm.
it's going to happen because that's what you want, and
Right.
you focus on what you want. For me, absolutely is one of these things because the thing is, none of us really know how something's going to unfold, right?
Right.
Necessarily. But like I always knew I wanted to ride at Grand Prix. I wanted to ride at the highest level in the sport. I knew this before I had the horse that actually got me to that level. I knew
Hmm.
that's what I wanted to do. I didn't know how I was going to get there, and at that stage, I didn't have the finances to fund it. I didn't have
Hmm.
necessarily the right people around me, but I knew that I wanted to do that. And I ended up doing it. And yes, it was a very long journey over, a 6 year period from when I got the horse to when it happened. But now I can look back and go, that's how I did it. But I didn't
Right.
know what was going to unfold. And things change as you go. So even though, you might be thinking, okay, well, this is how it's going to happen. Something comes into your life or someone comes into your life and changes that course path a little bit. But my thing is,
Hmm.
if you want it enough and you stay focused on that, it will happen,
Right.
right? And you've just got to trust that it will happen.
Yes, I think finances are one of the biggest discouraging factors in life that can keep
Mm,
people from taking a leap or a step, for fear
mm,
of like losing a safety net, or making a bad investment, or just the financial instability that can come with being completely responsible for yourself and your business. Any
mm.
words of wisdom for that part of it?
Yes. Yeah. So this is something I'm still working on for myself and trying to be better at. And I think, it was when I first read Bob Proctor's book, You Were Born Rich,
Mhm.
and I was blown away because I was like, God, no one teaches you about money as a kid. No one teaches,
Mhm.
well, maybe some kids are fortunate enough that their parents do or whatever, but and again, I'm not blaming my parents for this, but you're not taught about it at school or how to look after money or how to make money even, right? You taught, okay, you
Mhm.
got to go get a job or you got to go to university, but there was so much that you don't know about. And so I honestly only really started paying attention to this a few years ago after after listening to his listening to the audiobook. And it was something for about a 6-month period. I would listen to him every day.
Mhm.
And I had to change the way I viewed money as well. I wouldn't say that I
Mhm.
had an unhealthy relationship with money. And, you get, a lot of people go, oh, money is bad, or, having lots of money it makes you greedy. And it doesn't. And money, of course, is not bad. Money
Mhm.
is a tool, right? It's how we
Exactly.
use it. And there are so many incredibly wealthy people who do so much good with their money, and it's like anywhere
Right.
you look, you can look at anything in life and you can go, oh, well, well, that doctor's bad, so doctors are bad. No, he's a bad person, for example. So
Right.
it's like, it's what you choose to do with it. So I love that. And that's kind of where I'm trying to focus on. And I think the limiting beliefs I had was that, oh, I'm never going to earn a lot of money because I like riding horses, and you can't earn money riding horses, and you can't, so I had these, without
Mm.
even totally realizing it, I did have these limiting beliefs. And it's only been recently that I've like, but actually, that doesn't define me. Just because, I could do something else to earn money. I could write a
Right.
book one day, right? And I am actually writing a book.
I love
Or I
that.
could, yeah, or so I started going, oh well, actually, what if I might start up an online course one day to earn money? But it's so interesting, because as much as that might sound super obvious to so many people, for me, it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't something I thought about. I just thought, well, I ride horses. I teach people how to do dressage. That doesn't make you a lot of money. Um,
Mhm.
so so yeah, I would just say, explore options for yourself. If you're feeling like you're a bit stuck, or in a job, and you're like, well, this is the only way I earn money and I'm limited,
Mhm.
write down ideas, explore what is your passion, what do you love, what could you, and for me, I am on this journey, so I'm still going through it. And
Mhm.
well, maybe you never stop go on the journey, but and I'm exploring, and I'm excited by it, because equally, I don't know what I might think of that suddenly could be a business idea, right?
Exactly.
So, but what I would say is, people need to have a good relationship in a sense with money to attract money into their lives. They've got to have,
Right.
and so I would say, if you're struggling with that, go deeper into that. Why do you maybe feel money's bad? Why do you feel having it is being greedy? Maybe explore that for yourself, because sometimes I think people can
Mhm.
have these blocks without actually knowing they're there, you know,
Mhm.
and that can
Yeah.
then stop them from actually making money. Yeah.
Yeah. And almost, I think there's sometimes you can get in a cycle of working and then bills and lifestyle, to where you have to keep working to keep your head afloat. And then it's
Yeah.
like, well, what is it that's giving you the joy? Is it the work? Is it the lifestyle? And then people become attached. And like, that's something I want to ask you about too, because you've made, it sounds like, at least four major moves, from South Africa to UK, UK to Denmark, and then
Mm,
UK to
mm,
Or Uruguay.
mm,
Obviously, you don't get too attached to one place, and you're able to not need to bring your entire life across the world.
mm.
Have you always been like that? Was that something you kind of trained yourself or learned to, um, kind of like let go of, like material attachments?
Yeah. So, it's again very, I love this question, because I think the way my life has gone, yes, I've learned to do that. But it's so interesting, because when I was younger, I sort of thought to myself, when you're a kid and you think how your life's going to unfold, or maybe what you see your life
Mhm.
being like. And I I would say, and growing up, it's like, I again had a great childhood, but my parents weren't very wealthy. We had a nice life, but it wasn't like I
Mhm.
was surrounded by lots of money or anything like that. But as a kid, I was thinking, oh, one day I'm going to be rich, and I'm going to have this big house, and
Mhm.
I'm going to have this lovely relationship, and everything else. And none of that really happened in my life. But I've always sort of been a romantic at heart, and
Mhm.
so I have been in relationships. So I've been single for most of my life, but I have had relationships. And there was a time with my ex that we were living together, and he had a really beautiful home, and I felt like I was living that life I wanted to have, a gorgeous country
Mhm.
house, and I had the horses. It was like this sort of life that I imagined me having, but it lasted for only 2 years or 2.5 years. We split up.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, damn it. Anyway, so I think, yes, I've learned to not necessarily hold on to too many things and to be like, for me, home is where my heart is and where I am and what I create around me. And
Mhm.
don't get me wrong. One day, I would love to buy a house. I would love to have a place that I can call this is my home, where I can open my doors to my family to come and stay. You know, at the moment where
Mhm.
I live in a gorgeous, but it's a 1 bedroom home in the beautiful countryside, close to the sea. So it's stunning, but you know, it's not mine. I'm renting, but I'm fine with
Mhm.
that. And also because I am in a place where I don't know how long I'm going to stay here. This is not like I've come to Uruguay. I'm like, okay, I'm here for the next 10 years. I don't
Right.
know. I might be here for another year or two. I don't know. So, but this is where I find sort of the excitement in life as to what's going to happen next. And I
Yes.
feel like this journey I'm on, you know, things are happening and I am also keeping my goals in mind. And one of those is to have my own home one day, you know,
Mhm.
and to have more of a sort of a stable situation in a way, if you like.
Right.
Um, but I don't know when that's going to happen.
Right. Or where it will be even.
Or where it'll be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No idea.
No, that's how I am too. I have the visualization of what it looks like, how it feels. I don't know
Hmm.
when, where, like how I'll do it or get there, what I'll be doing, but I have
Right.
the idea of it and the feeling of it. And so I feel like when I get closer, I'll know by how I feel.
Yes. Yeah, I
So,
love that. That's really
uh,
amazing.
so we've got 8 more minutes. I want to talk to you about life coaching because obviously we've connected through the Jay Shetty Coaching School.
Yes.
What brought you into wanting to be a life coach? Have you had one before? Tell me more about this journey.
Yes. So yes, I have had one before. But it's the journey for me started when I was 20 and I went on a life coaching weekend with the Coaching Academy in the UK. And
Oh.
I just gone through a bit of a horrible situation. And my mum was like, I think she was trying to cheer me up and she saw this advert. I think it was literally in the paper. And she was like, oh, this is coaching weekend, life coaching. And like, I
Mhm.
didn't know what life coaching was. And, you know, this was back in, I don't know, so it must have been like 2005 or something. And anyway, I went on this weekend and I loved it. And I
Mm.
actually met on that weekend one of my dearest friends, Lorena, on that she was there. And we met on this weekend and we have become such good friends. Oh, well, we became instantly good friends. And I'm now, you know, godfather to her twins who are now just turned
Oh.
17. Yeah, so
Wow.
that was amazing. And for me, if my reason for going to that life coaching weekend was just to meet Lorena, then that was, you know, job done. Wow, amazing. But
Mhm.
what it did at that time, I was like, oh, I'm so inspired by this. I want to be a life coach. And my well meaning friends and family said to me, what do you know about life? You're only 20. How can you be a life coach? And so I was put off by that, but I'm glad I
Mhm.
was because yeah, it wasn't the right time for me to do it. You know, and I had so much else to do in my life that I'm so glad I did. And I'm glad I didn't carry on with the training. Anyway, but I remember thinking maybe maybe one day, like when I'm 40, I'll be a
Mhm.
life coach. And then I've been following Jay since lockdown of so March 2020. I've been following and I read his book, Think Like a Monk. And I, you know, love everything about him. And then I started listening to his podcasts, which I find amazing with the people he interviews,
Mhm.
fascinating. And I was aware, when was I aware? Probably a couple of years ago that he did a life coaching school, had a life coaching school. And then I went on his website and I found myself a life coach in New York, actually. So I was living
Mm.
in Windsor and I wanted someone to help me with my business. And I found him, my life coach, and underneath his name, he said it was business and success coach. And I was like, yes, I like this.
Yeah.
And I had sessions with him kind of over nearly a 2 year period. Um, and it really helped me, you know, and it helped me, even though we were focusing quite a lot on like from a business point, it helped me with my life. You know, it helped me on
Mhm.
different aspects of it that I wasn't even looking for or didn't realize I was looking for or needed, but it came out
Mm-hmm.
in the sessions, right? And so it was really, yeah, that was my experience with a life coach, and the fact that I was a Jay Shetty certified life coach. What got me to start the course was a few months ago. I was, well, when did I sign up? Literally October, right? So
Mm,
I I think I got an email. I subscribed to Jay Shetty, and and most of the times I don't even read the emails because I'm like, it's just another email. And
yeah.
I opened it, and it was like, you've got a day or so many hours to join. And I just looked and I thought, you know what? Maybe this is my time to do it. Like maybe this is me. This is what I have to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just organized a call, and I just went from there, and I started, and I was like, yeah, it feels right. And I just turned 39. So I'm like, okay, I'm nearly 40. So,
Yeah. You're on your timeline.
and it just felt right. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's fine. Yeah.
And so that's something very new that you just decided to commit. Like you've had this idea of being a life coach, you kind of
Mm,
foreshadowed it for yourself, and then
yeah.
the timing of it sort of clicked in Uruguay.
Exactly right. It just because I've got more time here because of the way my life is
Uh-huh.
at the moment. So I
Right.
feel like I'm not like panicked about trying to fit in the studying and everything. I feel like no, I've got the time to do it. Um,
Right.
and yes, yes, to be honest, it's been in my mind coaching over the years, but I couldn't even say that I was 100% sure I was going to do it one day, but I felt like I probably would. Um, and I'm very glad that I am doing it now, because
Right.
not that I want to replace it with my career I have. I love what I do. I love training people on horses and coaching, but I want to do it as something else as well. I want to broaden my horizons. I want to have something extra, right? From
Right.
helping people also to an extra income, another way of earning money. Yes.
Yeah. And it just enhances everything. Like it enhances your skills and business and like relationships. I've learned so much about myself going through the coaching program. I'm curious
Yeah.
about, you said when you're 20, everyone is like, "Oh, you need to live more life
Mm,
first."
mm.
So what have you learned from 20 now to 39, and like how have you, looking back, like how what lessons have you gone through in life that do set you up to be a better coach now?
Gosh, yeah. So that's a great question. I mean, so much really. I learned so many life lessons. I mean, we probably don't have time to go into all of it, but there was, just through things that I've done with dealing with people, right, with clients, because my business is all about
Mhm.
clients. I also, there was a 2-year period where I actually worked as cabin crew, and I flew to Singapore, Hong Kong, and Bangkok
Oh,
every week
cool.
because I worked for Qantas Airways. And
Nice.
so I learned quite a few things in that industry. Um, but a big part of it has been the life lessons I've learned in my own work, and mistakes I've made, which have taught me lessons. So, for example, the reason I ever ended up on that coaching weekend was because the week before I was in court because I was at the age of 20, I was in court because of a situation where I was actually suing someone because
Mhm.
they'd sold me a horse, and it was this whole big thing, and they'd lied about things. And it was awful. But at the time I sort of felt like, oh, I'm so right, and I should get my money back, and this is not fair. But
Mhm.
I realized, through over the years, that I made some really silly decisions. So I'm the reason I got into that situation in the first place, right? But at the
Mm.
time, I was like, oh, this is not my fault, and it's their fault, and it's not fair, and everything else. Um, so I've done a lot of growing up, as I'm sure we all
Yeah.
do over the years. But really, to you, Courtney, it's the last sort of 3 or 4 years that I can say I feel like I've worked a lot on myself and developing and growing and learning about myself and listening to
Right.
myself. And that I feel is where I'm more in tune with my emotions and who I am as a person and really what I want in life. That's, I would say, what's got me right
Yeah.
now to be, let's do this life coaching course.
Right. It's like the willingness to be more self-aware and to give
Yeah.
yourself feedback and to be accountable for your
Yes.
actions, your behaviors, decision making, all of that stuff.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Oh, I love
Exactly.
that. So what final words of wisdom would you have for someone not even going into life coaching, but someone
Mm,
who's interested in entrepreneurship, who might be interested in world travel, what and
mm,
maybe hasn't left home or has that fear of, losing a safety net or
mm,
comforts and material comforts and all of that? What kind of
mm.
advice, what words of wisdom would you have for that person?
I would just say, just do it. Just buy that
Nice.
plane ticket. Just pack your suitcase. Just go. But of course, coming from a place of if you're in a position that of course, like I said to you, I didn't have a mortgage. I was single. I don't have children.
Hmm.
For me, in that sense, it was easy to do. I think if you're wanting to do something, you've got more commitments. I think step by step, start planning it. My biggest advice would be start writing it down. Write down what you want. Write down what that looks like to you, right? And because
Right.
everyone's situation is different, of course. And it's a little bit like I think if you've got a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, but maybe say you have a job and you have to have that job because you're paying your bills, etc. But maybe you
Right.
can start to explore your passion on the side a little bit. And, so you still have your job, but you start dipping into that passion that might turn into a business. Yeah, so I'm
Right.
not saying like, oh, just give up your job and go and do that because maybe that's a bit crazy. But,
Yeah.
the thing is, if it's one of
Well,
those
that's what
things,
I did.
oh, did you? I love it. But that maybe that was right for you, right? If that's good for you.
Right. It's
Yeah.
the lack of the safety net, I think, that motivates me a little because it's like
Okay.
I have to do this. I have no other option but this.
Right. Amazing. Yeah.
I don't recommend it. It's very
Okay.
stressful.
Okay. It's very right. Yeah. And and so exactly. So I would just say that, but if you never start, right? If someone's sitting there going, "Oh, but I have this idea or this passion that I feel I really want to do this, but I've got to do my job."
Mhm.
And if you never make a start, you're never going to do it. I know it sounds so obvious,
Yeah.
but it is,
No,
right?
yeah.
So you've got to start little by little, and even if you just start reading a book on the idea of how you might start your business or listen to that
Yeah.
podcast or whatever, but then things start opening up to you, or have that conversation with that person who's maybe doing what you want to do, right?
Yes.
And
The networking
that would be my
aspect, yeah.
advice, is start exploring it and see what comes to you.
Oh, that's great. I love your energy, Shaun.
Thank you, Courtney. Well, likewise, it's been
It
amazing
was
talking
so
with
great
you.
talking with you.
Well,
Yes, it was so
mm,
great.
well, I've loved all your questions, so thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Thank you for joining us today. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and join us in our next conversation where we'll be exploring the extraordinary lives of ordinary people. I'm Courtney Lofton, and this is Ordinary Eccentrics.